The wind on Kareth 9 always carried a strange whistle, as if the canyons themselves mourned. Elias Kane had grown used to it in the weeks since he arrived. He hadn't come for adventure, not anymore. Once he had been a soldier, running through war zones with orders ringing in his ears. Now he wanted silence. He wanted to forget. Kareth 9, with its endless stone valleys and violet skies, was as far from humanity's noisy colonies as he could manage. His days followed a rhythm: hunt for food, mend his shelter, walk the canyon paths until exhaustion dulled his thoughts. It was supposed to be lonely and safe. That changed the day he heard a sound he had not expected on this world, the crack of energy weapons, followed by a cry. At first he froze. Trouble wasn't his problem anymore. But something in that cry, a sharp edge of pain, yet fiercely defiant, pulled him forward before he had time to argue with himself. He slid down a ridge, careful and silent, until he reached a ledge overlooking the canyon floor. There she was, a lone figure, tall and lithe, pressed against the rocks. Her skin shimmered faintly, touched with bronze gold in the strange light. Her hair, black as space, hung loose and wild. She clutched a curved blade, unlike any design Elias had seen. 3 raiders surrounded her, armored scavengers with crude rifles. She was wounded. Blood streaked one side of her face, but her eyes, bright burning silver, showed no fear, only fury. Elias's first thought was simple: she won't last long. His second thought was stranger: neither should I care. Yet even as he told himself to turn away, his boots were already carrying him down the slope. The raiders noticed too late. Elias grabbed a fallen branch for a weapon, but instinct and desperation led his hand to something else. On the ground near her, half buried in dust, lay her blade. Without thinking, he snatched it up. The weapon felt alive, almost humming in his grip. No time to wonder why. The nearest raider lunged, and Elias swung. The curved steel caught the alien's strike and sent him sprawling. Another fired, the shot grazing Elias's shoulder, but pain only sharpened his focus. He fought like he had in the war, close, brutal, fast. Beside him, the woman rallied. She used his distraction to strike at the second raider with her own hidden dagger. Together, without words, they turned the tide. Within moments, the raiders fled, limping into the canyon shadows. Only then did Elias lower the blade. His chest heaved, the old soldier in him awake again. He looked at the woman. Her gaze was fixed, not on him, but on the blade in his hand. Her silver eyes widened, then narrowed with something between shock and disbelief. She whispered words he didn't understand, her voice trembling. Elias frowned. "You all right? You're safe now." But he didn't know. By picking up that blade, by fighting with it in her defense, Elias Kane had just crossed a line he couldn't see, a line that would bind his fate to hers in ways neither of them yet understood. And for the first time in years, the silence of Kareth 9 felt broken. Elias stood there, catching his breath, the curved weapon still warm in his grip. His pulse thundered in his ears, and the metallic taste of battle lingered on his tongue. It felt wrong, too familiar. He had sworn never again to fight like this. Yet here he was, blade in hand, heart racing as if the war had never ended. The woman did not move. Her eyes locked on the weapon he held, not on him. Her lips pressed together, as though she were witnessing something that should not be. Finally she spoke, her voice low, but sharp. "Put it down." Elias blinked. "What? I was just—" "Put it down," she repeated with more force this time. For a moment, Elias considered arguing, but the tremor in her tone caught him off guard. He had no wish to frighten her. Slowly, he lowered the blade, holding it out, hilt first.
She snatched it back with surprising speed, clutching it against her chest. Only then did she stagger, as though the fight had taken more out of her than she wanted him to see. Blood streaked her arm and dripped from her fingertips, yet her posture remained proud, defiant. "You should not have touched it," she said. Elias frowned. "Would you rather I'd let you die?" Her eyes flared, silver light flashing in them like stars catching fire. For a long, tense moment, she said nothing. The wind howled between the canyon walls, filling the silence. At last, she muttered, "You don't understand what you've done." Elias gave a half-smile that felt more tired than amused. "Story of my life." He reached into the pouch, strapped to his belt, and pulled out a ration cloth, offering it to her. "You're bleeding. Let me help." She hesitated. Her people, she knew, would have struck him down on the spot for daring to hold a clan blade. Worse still, for holding her clan blade in defense of her. The old laws were unyielding. To fight with the blade of another's bloodline was no small offense. It was a binding, a claim. But this human did not know. His eyes carried no arrogance, only simple concern. And that, more than the battle, more than the danger, shook her. Her name was Sarah Valen, exiled daughter of a proud clan, disgraced and alone. She had sworn never to bow, never to knead, never to bind her heart again. Yet now she stood with a stranger who had unknowingly sealed himself to her fate. She accepted the cloth without meeting his gaze. "You're reckless," she said quietly. "I've been called worse," Elias replied. He settled on a rock, pressing his own hand against the burn on his shoulder. What were they after? Sarah lifted her chin. "Me, and the blade you held." Something in her tone made his chest tighten. It was more than just a weapon. He wanted to ask, but her expression warned him not to push, so instead he nodded. "Then we'd better move," Elias said. "They'll come back." She glanced at him, searching for the weakness she expected to find. Instead, she saw a man weary but unbroken, a man who stepped into danger without hesitation. Against her will, her heart stirred. The bond had already been sealed, but Elias Kane had no idea.
The canyon narrowed as dusk fell, shadows stretching long and sharp across the stone. Elias moved with practiced steps, scanning the ridges above for movement. Syra followed, her stride graceful despite her wounds, though her hand never left the hilt of her blade. They did not speak at first. Silence seemed safer. The raiders could be out there, waiting. And yet, the silence between them carried something heavier, something neither knew how to name. Elias finally broke it. "You walk like you've done this before. Hunted, I mean." Syra's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "I have been hunted most of my life." The honesty of it startled him. He had expected defiance or anger. Instead, her words were bare, almost weary. Elias said nothing, but the soldier in him recognized the truth. She carried herself like someone who trusted no one, because no one had earned it. They stopped near a shallow cave where the rock shielded them from the open sky. Elias gathered kindling, striking sparks until a small fire glowed between them. Syra sat across from him, her eyes fixed on the flames. He studied her quietly. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, not just in form, though her alien beauty was undeniable. It was something deeper, a strength bound with pain, pride wrapped around a heart that still beat fiercely, despite scars he couldn't see. "You fight well," she said suddenly, her voice softer than before. Elias shrugged. "Old habits. Spent too long in wars I never wanted." Her gaze lifted to him then, sharp and searching. "And yet you chose to fight for me. Why?" He hesitated. The honest answer came before he could stop it. "Because you needed help, and because no one deserves to die alone." Her chest tightened at his words. To her people, strength was everything. To need another was shame.
Yet this human spoke of it as though it were natural, honorable even. She did not know how to answer, so she looked back to the fire. Elias leaned back against the cave wall, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, he did not feel entirely alone. Strange, considering he hardly knew her. Stranger still that he wanted to. Syra's hand brushed the blade at her side, her clan's sacred steel. His fingerprint still lingered on the hilt, though he did not realize what that meant. By the old laws, the bond had been sealed. His fate was tied to hers until death. She should have hated him for that. She should have struck him down to keep the shame secret. Instead, her heart whispered something else, something dangerous. What if this bond was not a curse? What if it was a gift? The fire crackled. Elias drifted into restless sleep, but Syra remained awake, watching him. For all her strength, she felt an unfamiliar fear gnawing at her. Not of the raiders, not of exile, but of the possibility that this human might reach the one place she had kept locked away, her heart. And that, perhaps, terrified her most of all.
Morning on Kereth 9 arrived without warmth. The sun was pale and distant, its light filtered through violet clouds that never seemed to move. Elias rose first, shaking stiffness from his limbs. He had not slept well. Dreams of old battles haunted him, and when he woke, he found his hand still curled as if around a rifle that was no longer there. Across the fire's ashes, Sarah sat with her blade laid across her knees. She had not slept at all. Her eyes were sharp, watchful, though shadows beneath them betrayed her exhaustion. "You kept guard all night?" Elias asked. She tilted her head slightly, the faintest lift of her brow. "And if I did?" "Then you're running on fumes," he said. "You'll collapse before the day's done." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she did not argue. Instead, she rose with fluid grace, sliding the blade back into its sheath. "We move. The raiders will return with more." They set off together, climbing narrow ridges where stone cut the sky into jagged lines. The wind howled, tugging at their clothes, carrying dust that stung their skin. Elias scanned every shadow, his soldier's instincts gnawing at him. Sarah, though silent, moved like she was part of the land itself, alert, coiled, ready. Hours passed. The canyons gave way to twisted ruins, half buried in sand. Shattered pillars jutted from the ground like broken teeth, remnants of some civilization long gone. Elias paused, running a hand along weathered carvings. "Your people?" he asked. Sarah's expression darkened. "Not mine. Older, forgotten. This world devours history as easily as it does the living." Her words lingered as they pressed onward. The ruins made the air heavy, as though ghosts watched them from the cracks. Later, when they stopped to drink from Elias's canteen, he tried again. "Back on Earth, ruins like these are preserved. People study them, even build monuments so they won't be forgotten." Sarah gave him a puzzled look. "To honor the dead?" "To remember the living," Elias said. "We like to keep stories alive. Songs, too. Music. You'd like it, I think." Her eyes softened in a way he had not seen before. "Music," she repeated, as though tasting the word. "My people do not sing. To them, silence is strength." "Sounds lonely," Elias murmured. Sarah did not answer, but she carried the thought with her as they walked. The ground trembled suddenly. A rock slide thundered down from the cliffs ahead, forcing them into a narrow side path. Elias shoved her behind him as dust choked the air. He spotted shapes above, raiders, their rifles flashing in the dim light. "They found us," Elias growled.
blaster fire rained down. He pulled Sarah close, darting between stone spires for cover. She gripped his arm, her silver eyes blazing, not with fear, but with fire. "Then let them come," she hissed. Elias almost laughed, despite the danger. For all her pride, she was unbreakable. Together, they sprinted deeper into the labyrinth of ruins, hunted, yet unyielding. Every step bound them closer, not by law, not by accident, but by survival. And though neither spoke it aloud, both felt the truth pressing against their guarded hearts. Neither one of them was meant to walk alone anymore.
Night fell hard over the ruins, draping stone and sand in a deep violet gloom. Elias found a hollow beneath a leaning wall, just wide enough for a small fire and a little rest. He laid his pack down, aching in every muscle. Sarah followed, but she stood for a long time with her blade unsheathed, staring out into the shadows as if expecting ghosts to rise. "You're burning yourself out," Elias said gently. "Sit, rest." She glanced at him, lips pressed tight, then finally lowered herself to the ground. The firelight painted her features in copper and gold, but her eyes seemed distant, burdened with something she had carried too long. For a while they sat in silence. Elias cleaned the cut on his shoulder, wincing at the sting. He noticed Sarah's wounds too, deeper, bleeding slower now. He tore a strip of cloth and held it out. She hesitated, then accepted. Their fingers brushed, and the brief touch struck them both with a jolt they did not name. She bound her arm in silence, her gaze fixed on the flames. Finally, she spoke. "You asked me before what the raiders were after. You asked what it meant when you took my blade." Elias looked up, sensing the weight in her tone. "Yeah, you never answered." Her silver eyes met his, unflinching now. "Because you do not yet understand what you've done. Among my people, the blade is not a weapon. It is blood, lineage, soul. To wield it is to bear the weight of all who carried it before." Elias frowned. "I didn't know. You fought for me with it." Her voice trembled, though her posture remained rigid. "By the old law, that act binds you, not as ally, not as comrade, but as husband." The fire crackled between them. Elias felt the world tilt, as though gravity had shifted under his boots. "Husband?" "Yes," Sarah said now, soft, almost a whisper. "The vow is sealed. You are mine, and I am yours, until death." Elias stared at her. He wanted to laugh, deny it, dismiss it as superstition, but the firelight in her eyes told him this was no joke. To her, this was real. "I never meant—" His throat closed around the words. He saw the hurt flicker across her face, quickly masked by pride. She turned her gaze back to the flames. "I know," she said. "You did not choose it, but the law does not care for choice." Elias exhaled slowly. His first instinct was to protest. He had spent years running from obligations, from chains that others forged for him. He wanted no more bonds. And yet, as he looked at Sarah, bruised and unyielding, proud even in exile, he felt something stir, a thread, fragile but undeniable, pulling him closer. He said at last, "I don't know what this means for me, for us, but I won't run, not while you're in danger." Her silver eyes softened just slightly. That was enough to keep the silence between them warm instead of cold. But in Sarah's heart, she knew the truth. Whether Elias accepted the bond or not, their fates were already entwined, and the galaxy would not let them remain untouched for long.
The ruins offered no peace. Even as Elias and Sarah sat in uneasy quiet, the night carried sounds, gravel shifting, metal clinking, voices carried low on the wind.
The raiders had not given up. They had tracked them. Elias rose to his feet, jaw tightening. They're here. Sarah already had her blade drawn. The silver in her eyes seemed to glow in the firelight. Then this ends tonight. Before Elias could answer, the first shot cracked through the air, striking stone inches from his head. Dust showered down. He grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her deeper into the ruins, weaving through broken pillars and shattered walls. Energy bolts streaked after them, turning night into chaos. "They're flushing us out," Elias muttered, breath sharp. His soldiers' instincts screamed for cover, for a plan. But there was nowhere left to run. They were being herded, trapped. Sarah stopped suddenly, pulling free of his grip. "No more running," she said, her voice hard as steel. Elias turned, ready to argue, but the sight of her silenced him. She stood tall in the moon's violet glow, her blade raised high, every line of her body declaring defiance. It struck him then, this was not just about survival. This was her pride, her bloodline, her vow. He drew in a deep breath and nodded. "Then we stand together." The raiders emerged from the shadows, half a dozen this time, armored and armed. Their leader stepped forward, a jagged scar splitting his face. "Give us the blade, exile, and maybe we'll let the human live." Sarah answered with silence. Elias felt his pulse steady, the way it always had before battle. Fear faded, leaving only clarity. He crouched low, picking up a shard of broken stone in one hand, while his other tightened around the pistol he had carried since the war. The fight exploded like lightning. Blaster fire lit the ruins. Elias moved fast, weaving between cover, firing back with sharp precision. He wasn't the strongest, but he was clever, ruthless, unpredictable, the way only a human soldier could be. He used the terrain, ricocheting shots off metal beams, driving raiders into Sarah's waiting blade. And Sarah? She was a storm. Her curved steel sang in the night, cutting through armor, striking with grace born of centuries of tradition. Side by side, they moved as if guided by the same heartbeat. She guarded his blind spots, he covered her with fire. For the first time, Elias realized they weren't just surviving, they were winning. But victory carried its cost. A blaster bolt slipped past his guard, striking Elias hard in the side. He stumbled, breath knocked out of him, heat searing his ribs. Sarah's cry tore the air as she cut down the shooter with brutal precision. Elias fell to one knee, vision blurring. He heard her call his name, fierce and desperate. He tried to answer, but blood filled his mouth. The last of the raiders broke and fled, vanishing into the night. The battlefield fell silent, except for Sarah's ragged breathing and Elias's shallow gasps. She dropped beside him, pressing her hands against the wound, silver eyes blazing with terror she could not hide. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice cracking. And for the first time, Elias saw it. Sarah, not as warrior or exile, but as a woman fighting not to lose the one bond she had left.
Elias lay sprawled against the cold stone, blood seeping through his torn jacket. Each breath rattled, shallow and weak. His face pale beneath the flickering firelight. His pistol had slipped from his hand, clattering uselessly to the ground. Sarah knelt beside him, pressing hard against the wound with trembling hands. The warmth of his blood spilled through her fingers, a reminder of how close she was to losing him. She had watched comrades die before. She had buried kin. But this was different.
Sarah knelt beside him, pressing hard against the wound with trembling hands. The warmth of his blood spilled through her fingers, a reminder of how close she was to losing him. She had watched comrades die before. She had buried kin. But this was different. "Elias," she whispered urgently, shaking him. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Stay with me." He managed a crooked grin, faint but stubborn. "You fight like fire. Don't let them take that." Her chest ached. She wanted to tell him he was a fool, reckless, infuriating. She wanted to tell him that no one had ever fought for her like this. Instead, tears burned at the corners of her eyes. No, she would not lose him. Sarah's hands hovered above his wound, uncertain, trembling. There was one way, one ancient rite of her people, forbidden outside the bonds of true mating. A ritual that tied life to life, spirit to spirit. It was meant to be shared only between fated souls. And yet, he had already taken the blade, already claimed the bond, even if he did not yet understand. Her pride whispered against it. Do not give him this power. Do not bind yourself to someone who might walk away. But her heart roared louder. Without him, you have nothing left. Sarah closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against his. Her voice dropped into the old tongue, words heavy with power and memory. She began the rite. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through stone and skin alike. Elias gasped as light spilled from her hands, seeping into his wound. Pain flared in his chest, but with it came visions. He saw her, Sarah as a child, training with her clan, pride in her father's eyes. He saw her exile, standing alone as her people turned their backs. He felt her loneliness, her fury, her desperate yearning for belonging. And then he saw her heart, fierce, unyielding, yet fragile beneath the armor she wore. The visions cut deeper, showing him not just her past, but her soul. Elias's own memories bled into hers, the war he fought, the lives lost under his command, the weight of guilt that drove him to seek silence on a world no one cared about. She felt his pain, his longing for peace, his hidden hope that maybe, just maybe, he was still worth something. When the light faded, they were both gasping. Elias's wound had sealed, the bleeding stopped. He was alive. But more than that, something had changed between them. They could feel it. An invisible thread stretched taut between their hearts, binding them in ways neither could deny. Elias reached up with a shaky hand, brushing her cheek. "Sarah," he whispered, voice raw, "I don't want to leave you. Not now. Not ever." Her breath caught. For the first time, she let her forehead rest against his without fear. The choice had been made.
The violet sun rose slowly over Kerith 9, spilling pale light across the broken ruins. Elias stirred, the sharp sting of pain gone from his body, replaced by a strange warmth that pulsed beneath his skin. He opened his eyes to find Sarah sitting near the fire, her blade resting across her lap. She wasn't watching the horizon. She was watching him. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, charged. Then Elias pushed himself up on his elbows, wincing slightly. "Guess I'm harder to kill than I thought." Her silver eyes softened, though her expression remained guarded. "You should not have survived. The wound was mortal." "I'd thank you," Elias said quietly, "but I don't think words cover what you did." Sarah lowered her gaze to the blade. I bound you to me. You understand that now. My life, my spirit, part of it lives in you. If you regret it— Regret? Elias interrupted, his voice steady. He struggled to sit upright, forcing her to meet his gaze. Sarah, I was already drifting when I found you. I came here to be forgotten. But you pulled me back into the fight, into life. If this bond is real, then I choose it. Not out of accident, not out of law, out of me. For the first time since he had met her, Sarah's proud composure cracked. A flicker of disbelief crossed her face, followed by something gentler, rawer. Her voice caught as she whispered, You would choose me, even knowing what I am? Exiled, dishonored, hunted. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe that's why. You're more than what they left behind. You're stronger than all of them. And I'd rather face the galaxy with you than spend another day hiding from it alone. The fire between them dimmed, but the air seemed brighter somehow. Slowly, Sarah reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. He laced his through hers, solid and unshaken. For a while, they simply sat there, two souls from different worlds, bound not just by ritual, but by choice. The bond thrummed quietly in their chests, not chains, but a tether of trust. Yet peace could not last. In the distance, smoke rose from the horizon, raider ships regrouping, hunting still. Sarah saw it and tightened her grip on his hand. They will not stop. Elias followed her gaze, then stood, his movement steadier now. He holstered his pistol, then reached for her blade, not to claim it, but to rest his hand on the hilt in a gesture of promise. He looked at her, determination in his eyes. Then let them come. This time, we don't just run. We build something worth defending. Her lips curved, the smallest of smiles breaking through the storm she carried inside. For the first time, she allowed herself hope. Together, they turned toward the rising sun. The ruins loomed behind them, shadows of the past. Ahead lay danger, uncertainty, perhaps even war. But they would face it side by side, bound not by accident, not by ancient law, but by a choice both had finally, fearlessly made.